Japan lost the war. Entire cities were reduced to ashes. And yet this country made a decision that stunned the world. It chose not to fight again. After World War II, while many nations focused on rebuilding armies and reasserting power, Japan did something radically different. It adopted a pacifist constitution. It banned war. It removed its own ability to attack forever. But how did this work? How did a nation that once pursued empire and conquest turn into one of the most peaceful societies on earth? And what did the Japanese people gain or lose by choosing not to fight? In this video, we'll explore what Japan truly learned after the war. Not through speeches or slogans, but through actions, culture, and quiet wisdom. You might discover that in a world obsessed with strength, Japan's greatest power came from restraint. But to understand how all of this began, we have to go back to the moment everything changed: the surrender. Why did Japan choose peace instead of revenge? Section 1. Why did Japan stop fighting? What kind of country loses everything and then decides never to fight again? That's what Japan did. After World War II, it made a quiet, radical choice. No revenge, no rearmament, no more war. But why? Why walk away from power? Why give up the very thing most nations cling to: military strength? Imagine this: your cities are bombed, your leaders are humiliated, your people suffer in silence, and the war ends with 2 nuclear bombs. The pain was real, but instead of striking back, Japan stepped back, not out of fear but out of reflection. What had war really brought them? Pride, glory, or only ashes? In 1947, Japan rewrote its future. Its new constitution included Article 9. It said, "We will never again wage war." This wasn't just politics, it was a spiritual reset, a national vow to break the cycle of violence. And here's a question for you. If your country were defeated in war, would your people choose peace or pride? In many cultures, surrender feels like weakness. But in Japan, it became a turning point. Not to fight was not to give up. It was to start over, with wisdom instead of weapons. So the question remains, was Japan's choice naive, or was it the wisest thing a nation could do? Section 2. From Empire to Constitution: a national reset. Japan once had an empire, a vast reach across Asia, a proud military, a belief in divine destiny. The emperor was seen as a living god. Obedience was absolute, and the people believed to die for your country was the highest honor. But in 1945, it all collapsed. The empire dissolved, the divine silence began, and the unthinkable happened. The emperor spoke. His voice came through the radio, calm, distant, telling the people the war was over. For many, this was the first time they'd ever heard him. And the first time they realized he was human. Japan had to start over. But how do you rebuild a nation when your identity was built on war? The answer came in 1947. A new constitution, written with American input, but accepted by a broken people seeking a new path. At its heart was something radical: Article 9. Japan would never again wage war. It renounced the right to maintain armed forces for aggression. This wasn't just legal reform. It was a spiritual and cultural transformation. Japan went from empire to ethics, from divine rule to democracy, from swords to silence. It wasn't easy. Many struggled with the loss of identity, but others saw hope, because in that silence, a new voice was forming. One not born of conquest but of conscience. Section 3. The American occupation: enemy turned teacher? How do you learn from the very country that defeated you? After surrendering in 1945, Japan came under U.S. occupation, not for months but for nearly 7 years. It was the first time in history that Japan had been ruled by a foreign power. American soldiers walked the streets. General Douglas MacArthur became the face of authority, and the Japanese watched in silence. Many feared humiliation. They expected punishment, chaos, even revenge. But something unexpected happened. The Americans didn't destroy Japan. They rebuilt it. They didn't erase the culture. They reformed the system. Land reform, women's rights, free press, a complete overhaul of education and governance. Of course, it wasn't perfect. There were tensions, power imbalances, and deep resentment among some Japanese. But step by step, something changed. The occupiers stopped being feared and started being studied. Young people wanted to learn English. They embraced democracy. They adopted blue jeans, jazz, and ideas. It was a strange reversal. The enemy had become the example, and Japan, still wounded, began to evolve, not by force, but by exposure. Not by forgetting the past, but by reinterpreting it. Can an enemy become a teacher? For Japan, the answer became clear. Only if you're willing to learn even from defeat. Section 4: Rebuilding without weapons, a national experiment. Can a country grow strong without an army? After World War II, Japan said goodbye to weapons. It banned offensive military force in its constitution. It placed trust not in soldiers but in civilians. This was unheard of. Most nations measure strength by tanks, jets, and missiles. But Japan chose factories, textbooks, and innovation. It was a bold experiment, one filled with uncertainty. Could a country defend itself without fighting? Instead of a military budget, Japan invested in infrastructure. Instead of war research, it focused on technology. Instead of conquering others, it worked on healing itself. The economy exploded. By the 1960s, Japan became the second largest economy in the world. Not through conquest but through quality. Electronics, cars, trains, steel. Japan became known for precision. And behind it all, a cultural shift. Discipline replaced aggression. Harmony replaced conquest. Teamwork replaced dominance. Japan didn't just rebuild its cities. It rebuilt its values. This wasn't weakness. It was restraint with purpose. Strength through creation, not destruction. But the experiment came with a cost. Japan relied heavily on U.S. protection. It faced criticism for not pulling its weight. Yet the results were undeniable. Peace brought prosperity, and Japan became a model for post-war recovery. So ask yourself, what kind of strength should we admire? The kind that wins wars or the kind that makes war unnecessary? Section 5: Samurai to Salaryman, changing the hero archetype. Before the war, Japan's heroes wore swords. They rode horses, followed honor codes, and died with pride. The samurai was more than a warrior. He was a symbol of loyalty, duty, and unshakable will. Generations grew up idolizing these values. But after the war, the sword was no longer the symbol of strength. A new figure took its place. He wore a suit, carried a briefcase, and fought not with weapons but with time, stress, and endurance. The salaryman became Japan's modern hero. Why? Because rebuilding the country needed workers, not warriors. Factories replaced battlefields, and loyalty was now measured in unpaid overtime, not bloodshed. The salaryman worked long hours, lived modestly, and asked little. He sacrificed for the team, for the company, for the nation. It was a quiet kind of courage. No medals, no glory. But without him, Japan's rise would have been impossible. This shift wasn't just economic. It was psychological. The collective became more important than the individual. Responsibility replaced rebellion, and emotional control became a virtue. In Western stories, the hero stands alone. In Japan, the hero disappears into the group and supports it. From samurai to salaryman, the meaning of strength evolved. It became quieter, more restrained, but no less powerful. So next time you see a tired commuter in a dark suit, you might be looking at a modern warrior. Section 6: When defense becomes diplomacy. What if you had no army, but still wanted to protect your nation? That's the question Japan faced. With Article 9 in place, war was no longer an option. So Japan chose a different weapon: influence. No fighter jets, no invasions. Instead, economy, culture, and trust. Japan began exporting more than goods. It exported values: precision, politeness, and patience. Cars, anime, cuisine, design. These became Japan's new diplomatic army. And it worked. The world respected Japanese quality. People admired the order. the discipline, the subtle strength. Instead of commanding through fear, Japan earned its voice through respect. But here's a question. Can a country truly be strong if it has no power to strike? In the West, strength often means deterrence, missiles, bases, military alliances. But Japan taught something different. That trust can be stronger than threats. That reputation can open more doors than tanks ever could. Of course, Japan still relies on U.S. protection, and critics say it hides behind others. But is that cowardice or wisdom? In your culture, how is strength shown? By dominance or by restraint? Japan's diplomacy is quiet, but its silence speaks loudly. In a world full of shouting, sometimes the whisper is what gets remembered. Section 7. Learning to lead quietly. Not all leadership is loud. After the war, Japan lost its empire, its army, even its voice. But somehow the world started listening. How did that happen? Japan didn't lecture. It didn't impose. Instead, it modeled. Through actions, not slogans. Through consistency, not control. It showed what a peaceful society could look like. Trains that run on time. Streets that stay clean. Children walking safely alone. These weren't accidents. They were choices. And the world noticed. Leadership doesn't always mean leading from the front. Sometimes, it means leading by example. In international forums, Japan didn't dominate, but it helped mediate, quietly, steadily, often behind the scenes. Japanese aid rebuilt parts of Southeast Asia. Its companies trained global talent. Its culture reached across borders. No flags, no fanfare, just impact. This kind of leadership is easy to overlook, but it lasts. It earns respect, not just attention. In a world where everyone wants to speak, Japan became powerful by listening. Where others pushed, Japan invited. Where others demanded, Japan adapted. Where others shouted, Japan bowed. So ask yourself, does true leadership need a microphone? Or just integrity, repeated quietly? Section 8. The cost of peace. What was lost? Peace has a price. Japan chose not to fight. But that decision came with quiet sacrifices. First, there was identity. What does it mean to be Japanese? If not a warrior, not an empire, not a power. Many older generations felt lost. The values they were taught, honor, sacrifice, loyalty, suddenly felt outdated, even forbidden. The new Japan praised modesty, conformity, silence. But where was the pride? Second, came vulnerability. Without a strong army, Japan depended on others for defense. This caused fear, and sometimes shame. Was it really peace if you couldn't protect yourself? And finally, there was memory. Some people wanted to forget the war. Others refused to let go of the pain. The nation moved forward, but some wounds never healed. Even today, debates continue. Should Japan have a real army again? Should it rewrite Article 9? Peace gave Japan prosperity, but it also brought a quiet identity crisis. Who are we if we no longer fight for who we are? Peace is beautiful, but it can be heavy, too. It asks a nation to give up pride, to accept humility, to grow without force. That's not easy, but maybe that's why it matters. Section 9. Would other nations do the same? If your country lost a war completely, what would happen next? Would your leaders ask for peace? Or demand revenge? Would your people accept defeat? Or cling to pride? These are not easy questions. But Japan had to answer them in 1945. And the answer it gave surprised the world. No riots, no uprisings, no call for more blood. Instead, Japan bowed its head and rebuilt. Now imagine another country, any country, if it lost a war so devastating. Would it accept total disarmament? Would it erase its army from the Constitution? Would it teach children not how to fight but how to avoid conflict? It's hard to picture, because most nations are built on struggle, on victory, on sacrifice. But Japan rewrote the script. It became powerful by refusing to act powerful. It found strength in letting go of force. That takes courage, that takes vision, and that takes something rare in politics: humility. Not every country could do it. Not every country would want to. But Japan's story asks us all, what kind of world do we want to build? One that remembers how to win? Or one that remembers why not to fight? Section 10. The silent strength. What Japan still teaches the world. Japan didn't win the war, but in many ways, it won the peace. Not through force, not through fear, but through quiet strength. Today, Japan is known not for its weapons, but for its safety, its manners, its calm. It's the country where people return lost wallets, where silence is a sign of respect, where children learn to clean their classrooms together. And none of this was by accident. It was a choice, a deep cultural shift that took generations to build. In a world full of noise, Japan became powerful by staying quiet. It taught us that peace is not the absence of power, but the discipline to hold it back. That leadership doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it bows. And that true strength is not about control. It's about character. This doesn't mean Japan is perfect. It faces challenges, tensions, contradictions. But its post-war path remains a rare example. A country that rebuilt itself. Not with soldiers but with schools, ethics, and effort. So what does Japan still teach the world? That you don't need to fight to lead. That you don't need to conquer to rise. That sometimes, the quietest nations leave the deepest mark. And maybe, in a time where everyone wants to be heard, what we really need to learn is how to listen. Cultural habits like this may seem small, but they reflect big ideas. How does your culture compare? Let's share and learn from each other. Leave a comment if you'd like. And please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.